Well, I'm excited to jump in here. We're going to start by talking about a topic that destroys a lot of different things. It's inflation. So since 2000, hospital services are up 275%, college tuition 196%, childcare, I feel this acutely, 185%, TV costs down 98%, so that's good news there. But things that don't matter got cheaper. The things that define your quality of life, they're crushing wealth faster than most entrepreneurs realize. So I wanted just to start us off, and we're going to put a chart up here that just shows a nice visual, and nice may be the wrong word, but just shows the increase in the cost of some of these core things over the last 25 years. And the first thing is there's a few things that stuck out to me in here, but I'm curious, as you look at this chart, as we're showing on the screen, what are some of the takeaways from you?
First of all, and there's a lot of pressure on this, is college worth it at the current price? Because the prices have gone so much since when I went to college. You have to start asking, is the value there? And I don't know. I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about it. That's a big one. And then also healthcare, just the cost of everything like hospital services. Just it's extraordinary how much it's gone and up and how much it's really making it difficult for a lot of Americans.
Yeah. I mean, and if you look back at in 2000, the medical care now is up 129%, childcare up 185%. And there's some troubling demographic trends here in the United States. And I think part of the attribution is due to the cost. And then when childcare is very, very expensive, up 185% since 2000. And very few people's income has grown at that level or is up 185% or 200% since 2000. So definitely some troubling trends here. But on the good news, cell phone services down 43%.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I feel like my cell phone bill goes up every single month.
Yeah, there's good. It's interesting about just inflation in general. And I was just reminding myself of a quote from one of the Ernest Hemingway books where one character is talking to the other character and he says, "How'd you go broke?" And the other character says, "Well, first, I only went broke in two ways. First, gradually, and then suddenly," which is, by the way, how everyone goes broke. But I often think about people and their wealth, and the way people go broke in their wealth is either suddenly, like they invest in a bunch of dumb, risky things, or gradually. They invest so conservatively that gradually over time, this insidious thing called inflation that you don't notice year by year can destroy your purchasing power and what you have.
Yeah. And I think an example here is, let's just say that your burn rate as an entrepreneur is $500,000 a year of after-tax income. If we were to look at the same cost of living for that $500,000 in 2000, 25 years ago, it would have cost $260,000. So think of that as you think of what is your consumption going to look like in another 25 years. Now, granted, we've had some hot bouts of inflation coming out of COVID.
Yep.
There's a lot of reasons for that. And
Yep.
hopefully we don't have those 9% inflation reads anymore. But it's crazy to think about those entrepreneurs that are spending $500,000 a year of after-tax money, and another 25 years just for that same quality of life. It's going to cost $1 million a year just to run that.
Yeah, you got to plan for that. And that's why, investing in assets that appreciate faster than inflation is just a critical, basic, fundamental thing that you need to do for building wealth.
Yep. And then like you said, if you're sitting on cash, you're accepting that you are deteriorating your purchasing power with the value of that $5 million in cash going down to $2.6 million over 25 years. So it's cash. Being sitting in cash is taking an intentional position. I think sometimes entrepreneurs think like, oh, I'll just park some money in cash and I'll figure it out later. And that can work if there's ever that figuring out later piece. Whereas sometimes it's just cash is cash and they like sit on cash, and then 1 year turns into 3 years, turns into 5 years. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, by us not being intentional about getting this deployed somewhere, we're being intentional by letting it sit on our balance sheet and erode our wealth.
Yeah, you hear some people say cash is trash, other people say cash is king, and I always say it depends. And the key with cash is you need to know what that cash is for. And sometimes, like you said, I know entrepreneurs will be sitting on $1 to $5 million of cash, and I'll say, "What's that cash for?" They go, "I don't know." When I see an opportunity. Well, how will you know when you see the opportunity? And they really haven't thought it through. If you have $1 million of cash and you say, "I know it's not a good investment, it just feels good. It's a soft pillow to sleep on at night." If you have enough other assets and resources, no problem. That's what that cash is for. It's your soft pillow to sleep on. But if you don't know what your cash is for, that's a problem. If you're sitting on cash because you're a real estate expert and you know when there's a moment where you can jump in and buy something and you have your criteria and your process, that can be a good use of cash. But too often entrepreneurs don't even know why they have the cash. And you need to know, why do you have the cash? What is the purpose for it? And then you can be smart with your cash.
Yep. I totally agree. And based off the current readings, right, we're in that 2.5 to 3% inflation reading. I know the Fed tries to target at 2%. We've been obviously running ahead of that 2% target, but the economy is also growing, I think, a little bit better than expected. So the good news is that inflation has come back down to a more reasonable level. I think if it can sit in that 2 to 3% range, that would probably be success for most people. I think we all just have learned a big lesson. If I think people who were around and saw the big inflation readings in the 70s and even the early 80s remember that, not too surprised. But I know for my generation, what happened after COVID was the first bout of inflation that I've really seen in a meaningful way. And I can definitely see how that shapes perceptions and how you can see it drastically erode your purchasing power. And it also hurts those generally on the lower income even worse, because groceries and eggs going up by 8%, 10% a year hurts those people on a fixed budget a lot more than us entrepreneurs that continue to create and grow more wealth.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because in my household growing up, inflation was so high at the time in the country that it was a big conversation in my household. And inflation was this huge, terrible thing that we had to get under control. I didn't quite understand it. But years later, when I was working with younger entrepreneurs, it was hard for them to understand when inflation was at 2%, that actually over time, 2% can be meaningful, and you could have higher inflation, which no one actually anticipated until the massive overreaction by the government on COVID, which was a big reason for the inflation.